All right, here we go. So, we have some good lessons to learn here. You were black, e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop to c4, bishop to c5. Okay, so we've talked about this line a little bit before, right? We talked about the center fort trick, right? So that's something you got to be aware of in most positions, but in this one it doesn't work, right? Why doesn't it work? Because what do you play here? In this position, what is it? You take the bishop, that's right, which is good to remember because the center fort trick, if the bishop's here, won't work, so you're safe to play this move. Okay, but I'm saying that because I know that we talked about that earlier. Knight to c3, knight to f6, good stuff. Symmetrical, d3, Rekharovka. That's Russian for castles. Castles. Uh-oh, and now you play a move I don't like at all, knight to g4. Can you tell me why I don't like it? I'll give you a clue. The reason I don't like it is because even if you get what you're trying to get, I don't like that. Here's the thing. Let's say they just let you do this. Let's say they just let you take this pawn. In this position, you're giving up two pieces.
That's not what I was trying to
So what were you going to do then if they attack your knight and put up the no parking sign?
I don't like it when they pin me.
Okay. So you were just trying to prevent that. Okay, but if they had played here, what would you have done? I'll let you do the math on where you have to go. That's right. I'll give you two guesses and you're only going to need one. That's your only move. So I mean, this is only going to make it worse, right? It's just as bad. So the issue is that this is not the most effective way to deal with that threat. There are a couple other things you can do. One, you can play this move yourself. I like that you're so attentive to what your opponent is trying to do. I've gone over at least one game of yours here, maybe two, and I've noticed that you're very good at recognizing what your opponent's trying to do, okay? But just because your opponent's threatening something isn't the end of the world. It's okay to be a little more aggressive, all right? I think you're too cautious. You're a little too insecure about what your opponent's doing, all right? There's a simple way to stop this threat. Block it, okay? It's actually funny because it's also a reason why this bishop isn't always the best developed piece there. Sometimes the bishop is developed here, even in Grandmaster games. It's because even though it looks passive on that square, the bishop actually serves a purpose that's better for the greater good, which is that it keeps this knight unpinned. So sometimes you think about your picture, your position on a bigger picture level, not just where every piece is most active. That's just a little piece of advice. So I don't like this move, but your opponent is kind of thinking the same way. Bishop g5, bishop e7, and that helps you. You've actually gained a tempo move there. After bishop to c1, now it says you played d5. So you got aggressive, but did you count the attackers and defenders? You have to count the numbers of attackers and defenders in chess. Your opponent has 1, 2, 3, and you only have 1. So you're just losing this pawn, right? Just losing that pawn, and that's, so let's see, what else would we have done here? Probably just bring the knight back. I mean, play d6, develop. One plan you can go for here is to play d6, move your king over, and try to play for f5. See, this isn't bad because you're going in this direction. You're going in the direction of your pawns, which means you'll have 1 open line, 2 open lines, 3 open lines, all right? It's only really working because they're not putting up the no parking sign yet on this knight, but as long as they don't, you might want to take advantage of it and try to gain some space. You know what space is? The squares available to your army behind your pawn. So the reason why we conduct plans like this is just to create avenues, create space for our pieces, okay? So that probably would have been what I would have done, honestly. Because if I played d6, even if they did this, I would probably happily go back and then make another move and still go for this kind of plan. All right, so this is a little bit either, I don't know if you played too fast or if you just kind of lost your focus for a minute, but you're just losing that pawn for free. Bishop c5, knight e3, queen f6, okay? Don't mind that at all. Knight f5, and now you win your pawn back. I guess if you traded here, you also would have been happy, huh? Because you got a pin. So good stuff. You're bringing your pieces out in a coordinated way, and I dig that. Bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes. Awesome. Knight h4 to attack your queen. And you said no bueno. Right? I like it. Knight goes back, and oh, there's got to be something magical now. Something magical. You played something magical with knight to d4. But I think I see something even more magical. I see a tactic. You know, let's take a trip to the magical kingdom, not Disneyland, somewhere else, right here. Knight to d4 is a good move, and it starts the tactic. It's the idea behind the tactic. You're trying to get this knight to move, right? Because if he moves, what do you do? Checkalicious over here. Checkmate. That's got to be the whole key. You want to remove this defender because of the power of this threat. But there's actually something, I think it works. I know it works at least to get a good trade for you. If you do this way, okay, that gives up a pawn at first. But if they move the knight, you checkmate. So they have to take the pawn, right? And now we do the same thing, but we bring the knight here. It's just like knight d4, in that if he moves, we checkmate. But it's better than knight d4 because if they try to guard it, you're also attacking the bishop. So it's actually a clearance tactic. It's a clearance sacrifice to move this pawn, open up this square, and then put this knight on e5. A double attack. In fact, if they back up the bishop, you still take with check and then mate. I think there's one way for them to save it. This surprising h3 move might work. But you have several good things here. I mean, one is this move. You know, now because if they take it, you're going to win your piece back, and you're going to win this guy next. So there's a lot of action going on here. Like I said, Magical Kingdom. This is what we want. That would have been a really sweet move to play, e4. You know how you start recognizing tactics like that? Is like, why did I see it like so quickly, right? I mean, I've played a lot of chess, right? But you start to recognize it when you have the right order of thinking in your head, when you know that there's a chance for checkmate at any position. I mean, it doesn't exist yet, but if there's even a chance, it gives you this sort of like alarm clock over time, where you allow yourself to start being a little more creative and looking for those chances, all right? So when you have checkmate, checks, when you have captures of pieces, then you start recognizing undefended pieces. Those are like all the ingredients for, you know, a ticking time bomb in chess. You know, like the potential of undefended pieces, an overloaded piece that is guarding such a powerful threat. It's like when you see someone with weak color squares or weak back rank, you allow yourself to consider those types of moves because you know the value of them. So starting with checkmate and forcing checks and moves that are capturing pieces, you allow yourself to consider those kinds of tactics because often there is a bomb exists, or it's like you're a shark in the water, you know, and if you smell blood, there might indeed be some fresh meat. But you have to consider more than one way to do it. So knight to d4, h3, knight f5, but now, you know, you see some ideas, but I think you're a little too locked in with this bishop here. You're not. I mean, you already missed this chance, but now when you play knight f5, you're just. Why were they afraid to just take this guy? Because you were going to take it, and they were worried about some kind of pin. What's the idea? Because they played knight h2, which by the way is not a bad move because the knight is pinned. And they kind of get away with it, I guess. Maybe they're still going to win material. Maybe not. But in the game they ended up doing. You could have maybe moved the knight back. Excuse me, and after takes, there might be some crazy trick to save some material because the pawn is pinned. So takes there, you only end up losing 2 pieces for a rook, which is better than a whole piece. But that might have been your best now. Unfortunately. Well, now you go back, but the piece drops, and with it your attack drops. So I bet most of the stuff you wanted to learn from this game we've already gone over, right? Because you were probably asking me to go over this game because you thought you had a better chance to win over here than you did. And guess what? Your instincts were correct, but maybe not at the moment you thought. This was your moment, right here. This was your one moment, Eminem style, 8 Mile. You ever seen that movie? Good for you. Don't ever see it. Horrible. Bad movie. But there is a song, One Moment. You got to own it. This was your chance. E4. It's actually a really cool move because it opens up this square in a way that that allows this tactic, and it removes the defender and the bishop. So all those ingredients are coming together. Again, it's like the ingredients for a disaster, you know? And I see those things quickly because it's just experience where you start to see there's checkmates and you recognize that. So if there's any kind of practical advice I could give you that applies to some other future games, it would be that you don't know all the mating patterns yet that I would know. You don't have enough experience to be able to look at a position and know quickly this kind of tactic is common, this kind of tactic is common. As you do more to improve your knowledge base, then you start to be able to do that. But already the practical thing you can do right away is just remember this advice I'm saying about the hierarchy of if there's checkmate possible, if there's a weak back rank, if there's weaknesses like of that nature, you have to allow yourself to consider as many candidate moves as possible, or you're doing the position a disservice. Okay, you're not considering, and you're going to miss those opportunities. And so again, this is tricky, and even like this move doesn't work. It guards the checkmate, but the bishop is hanging. So I think you would have been winning. I mean, I'm going to make sure I'm right, but it looks like, so maybe the best is actually this right away. But again, like here you can take, because two pieces are hanging. So this tactic before that we've seen a whole bunch of times would never be good if we're just giving up two pieces for a rook. But once we have this piece that's hanging, it's like it becomes a desperado tactic. You know what a desperado is? Tactic? You ever seen like old Western movies? Where like the guy goes into the bar like guns a-blazing and he knows he's gonna die, but he's a desperado cowboy. Another thing that I'm glad you haven't seen. No Westerns for these kids. No, but a desperado is like bonsai. You ever heard like a bonsai, like, you know, like a kamikaze? Someone's going crazy, like a bonsai Japanese warrior. You're too innocent to get my pop culture references. But the point is, a desperado tactic is when there's multiple pieces hanging, you, instead of doing a logical thing, you go crazy. You go take something, because it wouldn't work unless the fact that there's so much going on, you get to play this crazy desperado move and it works. Because they can't take everybody at once, they can't take the pawn, right? They can't take the rook and the pawn at once. So it's a desperado move, it just creates mass chaos. So that move works. And if they, yeah, so after e4, what else can they do? I don't know. I think they have to take it. And again, you have this, and again, h3, but you're playing a desperado move, and you're going to end up winning some material. Pretty tough.
What about if they don't take it and they move up?
But if they play up, you take, and you have a tempo here, because you're the one threatening mate. So they can take back. Actually, no, they're getting mated, so that it doesn't even help their problem, right? I mean, now you're just doing, or even just taking here, right? Because if takes, this is pretty sweet. So you'd still be mating. So, okay, I mean, all those tactics are not going to be able to be calculated right away without experience, or at least not as fast as I'm moving. But the point is you get a feel for the fact that those kind of moves you won't miss anymore when you see the level of what's at stake. You're allowed, you know, you go and you make sure you consider all your resources, okay, and then you won't miss those moves because you want to do it the most forcing way. Recognizing it at the first step, but the passive way may not be good enough. It'd be like, all right, before I play knight d4, is there any more forcing way to remove this knight? And then you might consider this, right? So, what are you saying?
What if the pawn takes?
Yeah, but then you have this.
Oh, okay.
And it's a double attack, right? And you're removing the knight and you've got this, so that's the whole idea. All right, well, after you lost that piece, it did get worse and it went downhill, but you know, your critical things to learn were in the beginning. I really didn't like knight g4 to begin with. Please don't do that again anyway, even though it ended up leading to this awesome lesson here, because this is not the right way to deal with this pin. I mean, just stop the pin. h6, or even remember the ideas I'm talking about. You retreat the knight and you play for like a pawn storm. But this is not the right way to do it, and if they had put up the no parking sign earlier, you would have been in trouble because you would have had no choice. The fact that they didn't do that ended up allowing this sort of tension to build that ultimately created this mating attack that if you had found, you would have been. All right, awesome stuff. Good lesson. Thank you for going over your game.